I just think he's full of What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. I am Shelby Maeve, and today I want to discuss the conspiracy theory that perhaps the notorious surprise attack on Pearl Harbor was an inside job orchestrated by none other than US President FDR. I'm not exactly sure how well this theory is or isn't known, but I just found out about it. And to be honest, there's a lot of suspicious activity surrounding the incident that I think would make anybody question it. This theory also weirdly feels more personal to me just because I was actually able to visit Pearl Harbor in the past, and I was able to see and learn and get a better sense of what happened in person. So to think that the events that happened there could have been an inside job is not only really heartbreaking, but also really interesting to think about. Going into this though, I want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. I try to be as neutral as possible when it comes to like conspiracy theories and mysteries and whatever, but I'm letting you know beforehand that I'm very intrigued by the potential validity of this theory, so that'll naturally probably create a little bit of bias from me thinking that it's true. But this is all for fun and information's sake. I am not an expert by any means. I'm really just someone who likes to research and talk about stuff. So if I say something today that you don't think is accurate, please just nicely let me know in the comments below. Now let's get into the theory. I assume that most of you are aware of the events that took place at Pearl Harbor, but in case if you aren't, here's a recap. Back on December 7th, 1941, the United States was attacked by the Japanese at the US Naval Base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The attack was catastrophic. In just 90 minutes, 12 battleships were damaged or destroyed, and 2,400 servicemen were killed. Pearl Harbor became known as one of the greatest military defeats in US history, and launched the US straight into World War II. And there's still an active naval base at Pearl Harbor today. I was actually fortunate enough to visit Hawaii and go see Pearl Harbor in person. Not only can you just walk around and read about everything that happened there or walk through their museums, but you can actually take a boat over to the USS Arizona Memorial, which is a memorial set up right over the sunken warship. Let me tell you, things suddenly get really real when you can just look over the side of the memorial and see the sunken ship below you, which is the final resting place for a lot of people. It's sad. Pearl Harbor has gone down as a devastating surprise attack from the Japanese. But could perhaps the incident have been orchestrated by none other than United States President Franklin D. Roosevelt? Now I know what you're probably thinking. Shelby, why would FDR attack his own country and kill his own men and destroy his own ships? That doesn't make any sense. Oh, but it does, my friends. To give you some context, let me give you a reminder of the current state of the world before Pearl Harbor happened. In 1939, over in Europe, Hitler had come to power and the Nazi Party was in full swing and determined to invade and conquer Poland, among many other places. But the Allies, made up of Great Britain, France, and Poland, obviously didn't want that to happen, and they declared war on Germany, sparking World War II. So it was Great Britain, France, and Poland, the Allies, against the Axis powers, who were Germany, Italy, and Japan.
Hi, hello, sorry, I just had to pop in here because I don't know why I keep pronouncing Axis powers as Axis powers. Don't go around saying Axis powers or you will look like a big dummy like me. Okay, that is all.
Despite the fact that the Allies together had more supplies and manpower, the Axis powers, although smaller, had more firepower, and just in general, a more efficient and disciplined military. After World War I, apparently the French and the British were really slow to introduce and to upgrade their weapons and practices, which is the exact opposite of what Germany did, who after their defeat in World War I, they kicked it into high gear and started producing tons of weapons, military vehicles, etc. The modernization of the German military quickly started dominating Europe.
The French Air Force we'd hoped would be able to defend themselves, but the French Air Force was hopelessly outdated, and I'm afraid to say that when war came they didn't fight very well. So the bulk of fighting fell upon the RAF.
The British pilots fought bravely but were overwhelmed by superior numbers and tactics. Within 5 days of the assault, without impeding the German advance, the RAF had lost over 200 aircraft.
Eventually, both Poland and France were conquered by Hitler, and being the only remaining enemy, Great Britain was struggling to defend itself against the Nazis, and desperately needed help from the US. FDR was actually for intervening in Europe's war, ultimately because he feared Hitler and the expansion of Nazi control. Even before Pearl Harbor happened, FDR seemed to have a priority in defeating Germany. However, most Americans did not feel the same. 80% of the American public had no interest in getting involved in foreign wars. In Roosevelt's presidential campaign, one of his main points was that he wasn't going to send our boys overseas. Americans wanted neutrality, and that's what he said that he was going to do. So obviously he couldn't just get involved with the war with so many people against it. But if he could orchestrate an attack on the US, that would likely cause the American people to support going to war. And before we even go any further and I give you a deep dive into how he could have possibly pulled this off, I just want it to be known that staging an attack on yourself and then blaming someone else for it as a means to justify attacking or waging war on that country is not at all an uncommon military practice. This is called a false flag, which is described as an attack or other hostile action that obscures the identity of the participants carrying out the action while implicating another group or nation as the perpetrator. And America has apparently been a part of numerous false flag operations, which is great. Anyway, I just wanted you to know ahead of time that it is not totally impossible for something like this to be intentionally carried out. FDR knew that if he wanted America to go to war, there would have to be an attack that was so devastating that America would have no choice but to join the war. And how would he cause an attack to happen on America? By provoking Hitler's allies, in this case, Japan. Eventually, a declassified document would be uncovered that contained 8 provocations that, if carried out, would cause Japan to attack the US. The memorandum was written by Arthur McCullum, a naval intelligence officer in Washington. McCullum was born and raised in Japan, so pretty interesting and convenient that someone who was born and raised and very informed of Japan is creating the guide on how to provoke Japan. In the document, McCullum suggested 8 specific things that would provoke Japan into attacking. One of those provocations was for the US to move the entire US naval fleet from San Diego to Hawaii, 1,100 miles closer to the Japanese mainland. Admiral James Richardson, who was the commander of the Pacific Fleet, strongly opposed moving the fleet to Hawaii because of the fact that it was potentially putting them in harm's way. But when he expressed these concerns to Roosevelt, he was relieved of his command. Officially, FDR never saw McCullum's document. But despite him having no idea of the document's existence, his administration still managed to carry out all 8 steps before December of 1941. Well, isn't that just a coinky-dink? Not only that, but leading up to Pearl Harbor, there were numerous warning signs that the Japanese may be planning an attack. According to American conspiracies and cover-ups, newly released naval records prove that from November 17th to November 25th, the US intercepted 83 messages that the Japanese admiral, forgive me if I butcher this name, Isoroku Yamamoto, sent to his carriers that were planning to attack Pearl Harbor. The US also intercepted messages between Japan and Japanese spies in Hawaii, and these spies were giving detailed information of where everything was in Pearl Harbor. Admiral Husband E. Kimmel was in charge at Pearl Harbor, and he was kept in the dark about everything. He was denied crucial intelligence that absolutely would have been helpful in defending Pearl Harbor because he had no idea that there were spies in Hawaii or messages being intercepted. He was completely taken off guard. Not to mention, he tried to do many things to defend Pearl Harbor, including sending his fleet out on exercises and searching for Japanese carriers, but he was stopped when the White House told him that he was complicating the situation. If anybody wants to let me know what that means. Another reason people think this was an inside job was because a few days before the attack, 2 aircraft carriers were sent away from Pearl Harbor to deliver planes to other bases, basically leaving Pearl Harbor completely defenseless. The aircraft carriers would have been Kimmel's best chance at defense since the Japanese were attacking by air, but they were sitting ducks. The attack was obviously horrible, a day that will live in infamy, Roosevelt said in now his very famous speech. Although some people reported that FDR didn't seem surprised about the attack at Pearl Harbor at all. He seemed to be more worried about now if the public would support the war. After Pearl Harbor, Americans kicked it into high gear and patriotism skyrocketed. So many men joined the military, and women joined the workforce doing jobs they'd never even been considered doing before. It was a very transformative time in our history, specifically because Americans felt that their country was threatened and under attack. Honestly, I'm very proud of Americans, I guess, because in a time of pure tragedy and devastation, everybody stepped up to the plate. They believed in all of the songs about the land of the free and the home of the brave, and the public's reaction towards the US's involvement in the war changed instantly. So if the conspiracy is true, then what happened is exactly what Roosevelt wanted to happen, to get the public okay with going to war. So the real question is, could FDR have willingly and intentionally sacrificed American soldiers in order to get involved in foreign wars? Personally, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. However, some people don't agree. Some people think that FDR could have not only known about a planned attack, but have been able to execute it without getting discovered or found out. Which I guess if you think about it, there probably would have had to have been a lot of people involved to carry out a plan like that. Would everybody really have been able to have been kept quiet? Oh, but it's not over! In 1999, Robert Stinnett published his book, Day of Deceit, The Truth About FDR in Pearl Harbor, claiming he had obtained information proving that FDR had foreknowledge of the attack on Pearl Harbor. The book was dedicated to Congressman John Moss for his creation of America's Freedom of Information Act. It was dedicated to him because of all of the documents and information that Stinnett was now able to obtain through the Freedom of Information Act requests. Stinnett exposed that the U.S. intercepted numerous radio messages from Japan and deliberately withheld information from Admiral Kimmel. This is especially shitty because Admiral Kimmel was actually demoted after Pearl Harbor and basically took the blame for it. He was exonerated in 2000 because of the withheld information, but still, how heartbreaking would it be to go pretty much your whole life thinking that you are responsible for unsuccessfully defending your country and have the blood of thousands on your hands? Like, that's so upsetting. But anyway, the amount of messages that were intercepted and ignored is a crucial part of this conspiracy. Stinnett says that the US would have known about any potential threats from Japan because of the Splendid Agreement. The Splendid Agreement was a system of 22 monitoring stations controlled by the US, the Dutch, and Great Britain. These stations ran along the west coast of the US, down to Southeast Asia, and into the Central Pacific. And according to Stinnett, the US has been intercepting messages from Japan since the 20s and has always known what they were up to. Stinnett also reported how Joseph Grew, the American ambassador in Japan, found out through the Japanese embassy that Japan was planning an attack, and he tried sending urgent messages to the US warning them that an attack on Hawaii was a very real possibility. Another warning that wasn't taken seriously. Not to mention, on December 5th, the Navy intercepted a message telling Japanese embassies around the world to burn their code books. Basically, Japan was saying to expect war within the next 1 to 2 days. Then in the early morning hours of December 7th, the US intercepted messages sent to the Japanese ambassador in Washington, basically saying that Japan is breaking negotiations and declaring war on the US. These interceptions were shown to both Roosevelt and General Marshall hours before the attack. You would assume at this point that Roosevelt would send an emergency warning to Admiral Kimmel, but he didn't. The Japanese said that they were breaking negotiations with the US at 1 p.m. on Sunday, December 7th, Eastern Time, which is the exact time that Pearl Harbor was attacked. In the end, I don't know if we'll ever know all the events that led up to Pearl Harbor. Ever since the attack, there's been documents about it that have gone missing or been altered. People involved were being just disingenuous or committing outright perjury in front of investigation committees. I'm sure there's just so much that we don't know, and we will never know. Stinnett even said that some of his information requests from the government were considered B-1 national defense secrets, and they wouldn't release those documents to him, so you know that there's gotta be so much information that we don't know about. So I guess a takeaway of this theory is that if it's true, it's just another example of people in power going to great lengths to deceive the American public. Because if you think about it, like, if Pearl Harbor never happened or wasn't made to be an actual threat rather than an orchestrated one, how would the war have turned out? If America would have never gotten involved, how would the world look right now? Would the Nazis have remained in power? Would the bombing of Hiroshima have happened? Or Nagasaki? Would FDR have still sent Japanese Americans to concentration camps here in the US, which is another really interesting concept to think about. If FDR was behind all of this, he would have sent knowingly innocent people into concentration camps where living conditions were not great and people died, and they were only there because they were of Japanese descent. Let me know your opinions on that what if in the comments below. The last thing I want to talk about that is kind of interesting to me is that despite the fact that Robert Stinnett wrote the book exposing how FDR had foreknowledge of Pearl Harbor, he also believes that FDR didn't have any other choice than to do what he did. I don't think I necessarily agree with him, but if you do think about it, if America didn't get involved, what would the world look like right now? Would America have ended up having to join the war eventually anyway if the Nazis continued taking over Europe? So what do you guys think? Do you think the US joining the war was inevitable? Do you think FDR was behind the surprise attack at Pearl Harbor, or do you think it was all a surprise tragedy? Please let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, definitely give me a thumbs up down below. It really does help me out and supports my channel. Also, if you like this kind of content that I'm doing and you want me to do more of it, leave me some suggestions. I am open for suggestions. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you the next time I upload a new video.